So good afternoon, everybody. I am Anto Budierjo. This is Monday Live, something that we do every Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern to figure out what's ahead for smart buildings. So the profiles of panelists are on mondaylive.org. Just as a reminder, views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. And I think by now you should all know how to use the Zoom tools. This deck is available on mondaylive.org, right on the homepage, if you need any of the links. Just as a reminder, this month's theme is new market dynamics, trying to figure that out. This is our agenda for today, our normal chit chat. And then we're going to be talking about new market dynamics and specifically crossing the chasm, the whole sort of chasm thing that we're going to do today. Before that, some slides from the members here. Ken talking about May issue, so we'll dig into that in a little while. John reminding us that video from Haystack Connect is up and available, and also about Whirlpool that I'm sure he'll talk about in a second. Therese talking about some interesting dynamics in the Bay Area, which sounds scary for tech companies, but they can afford it. I know it's got lots of logos. And Gina's talking about 50 million, how to get to 50 million. I'm keen to understand what's behind this slide. Roger is having a conversation. I'm not quite sure who with here. Cushman Wakefield. We'll get to the bottom of that. I saw this go past my my mobile yesterday. I don't know if it's true or not, or how realistic the technology is. Would love to get comments from others that know about this. And also, obviously, this chart that's on the right that everybody's looking at in the past few days from the CDC, it's kind of scary how fast we've actually got to this wonderful point where we don't have to wear masks anymore. Scary in a good way, I guess. And just as a reminder, we we have this homework assignment. Last time I checked, there were about 20 entries, and we'd love to get more before next week, which will be the last show for this month. So I've had a request to keep the slides up while we're talking. So let's do that and go to Ken.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad you did that. I got them up on my flat screen beside because you didn't do that, my teleprompter. So now I can read them off the screen. Good stuff. Okay, well, our May issue is up. We're also planning our June issue, and the theme is pushing digital dinosaurs. It's going to be all about the end of several eras and the beginning of some new ones. So I'm looking to having some fun discussions. I've already by throwing that out have stirred up some hornet's nests, so should be fun. Looking forward to that. Steve Jones did a YouTube talk talking about the new buildings, basically the building owners, we need to start prioritizing occupants. It's kind of a new measured variable in our industry, I guess, is we definitely have to design now for them, both from location and their whims, and it's kind of changing it. So he does a great discussion of that. Probably a good idea to watch the YouTube. Our next chapter is online. We use trust to create our build digital family. I think that's the underlying thing, is it's becoming obvious that not one of us has the total solution, that we're all just part of the solution. So that's in that we have to accept people, and we have to trust people, and we have to trust things like Haystack, and we have to trust things like BackNet, that these are families, digital families that we can be part of and make part of our solution. So I think we're more reaching out, and trust is becoming a true commodity.
Great.
That's about all I've got to add to that.
Thank you.
Ken, go back to Ken, just the whole trust thing, or starting to trust all these things, doesn't it make the industry a little bit more flexible, resilient, and just resilient when you've got multiple things you can trust rather than having to rely on one platform?
Yeah, I think so. But the other one is that the way the software people work is they never ever create the complete piece of software anymore. They go out and they get a piece of software. And so they have to trust that that piece is something they can build on. And you're quite right. The advantage of having that if you've got a choice of 4 or 5 pieces that will actually do the job, and you may use all 5 of them in different applications. And I think that's the way we kind of have to start looking at our industry, is we're all supplying a piece. We have to have a trusted piece, and we have to see how our solution fits into the big picture.
Very, very good. I also have to add, Ken, you may be head dinosaur, but if you were a dinosaur, you'd be a velociraptor. Quick on your feet, all right, adaptable.
Scary.
Thank
Just
you.
on
Take that as a compliment.
Please do.
Just on trust, one of the things that is going on in the Digital Twin Consortium is trying to sort of figure out how to communicate trust. That's kind of a big part. But over to you, John.
Yeah, just 2 quick things. First of all, we had the Haystack Connect event 2 weeks ago. All the videos are posted, so everybody can go right to the site and go to the schedule tab and watch any of the videos they had interest in. And that's a really big deal, to have every single thing, not just the PowerPoints, but I mean the actual complete recording of the sessions, all available. A lot of really important topics about making data interoperable, new open source initiatives, products released, et cetera. The other thing, I guess it's not so much about Whirlpool, but Smart Energy Decisions has been tracking a lot of these corporate commitments on a weekly basis, committing to net zero, right? And when you start seeing 2030, that's getting close. When I see 2040 and 2050, okay, great, I won't be around. You start seeing 2025 and 2030, and imagine that those public companies have to have some type of plan in place if they're making those types of claims and announcements. So I think that's interesting, because again, I think it shows momentum to make the built environment work better. So,
hey, John, given that you really didn't have a choice but to do a virtual session with Haystack this year, and of course that led to just sort of naturally doing videos. Assuming the next time you have an event, if it's in person, are you thinking you're going to want to do videos of all the sessions as well, because it's just a great way to communicate the information to those who can't attend in person?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a permanent artifact going forward. We're planning it for our company event, Skyposium. Yep. We may not live stream at the moment because we want to constrain, the people having fun on stage and doing stuff like that. But yeah, there's going to have to be recording. The idea of just saying, "Oh, the PowerPoints are available without the commentary," I think that's over. Yeah. So we're working on technically how to do that without, we don't want to turn the in-person event into a boring thing where nobody moves out of the camera frame or whatever, right? And constrain the fun. So, but yeah, I think that's a permanent.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Reese.
Commenting on the last one, I agree with you guys. I think, as we plan Niagara Summit, and we are planning Niagara Summit, that it will be, it will have a big virtual component, and the studio part becomes almost as important as the food. And there's nothing more important than the food up till now.
That is so true, Therese.
So yeah, I just threw this one in. That this is San Francisco tech companies. It is just the tech companies. It is just one city, but I think it's one city that's reporting, and that there's a lot of cities that just aren't reporting. really how much sublease office space is available and how that's hitting their bottom line. So other than what it says that, a company like Dropbox is like 400, more than 400 million. And Salesforce, of course, with its towers and all the major cities, it's not just San Francisco, but I remember being on Wacker Drive in Chicago and the big Salesforce tower going up there. And Chicago's having a hard time bringing people back downtown as well. That tripled during the pandemic. That's it.
Oh, what are all these logos?
Yeah, just the latest report from Memori that's focused on AI and machine learning ecosystem. So this is their attempt at defining the ecosystem. I thought it's interesting in the context of our new market dynamics, right? And one of the new market dynamics, of course, is AI, machine learning, tech, and all that sort of stuff. So found it interesting as to where they kind of put incumbents and where there's a whole bunch of new players in the space. And in fact, we're finding new players in the AI ML world constantly. So interesting report and their take on the ecosystem.
Just a quick comment on these kinds of things. Remember too, generally speaking, these are surround public companies and or companies that have taken an investment.
Yes.
So there are a lot of private companies that never show up on these kinds of things.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tracy. I think it's more, I was looking more to the types of the companies that they were. It was interesting the type of companies where they were putting them.
Yeah, and it shows where the investment money is going too, which is interesting in and of itself.
Yep, that is interesting.
And I think the good thing about Memori is it is just totally about our industry as well.
Yeah.
The fringes as well, but the core is our industry.
So go back to that one, I hate this list, Anno, because my name's not on there, Tossy Box. And
Ditto.
If you look at, who they're trying to bring in for, say, connectivity, no. This speaks to the slowness and barriers to entry of bringing these buildings online because they're using legacy crap. Sorry, I apologize.
Couldn't agree more. Bill.
Yep.
So I had a call with an analyst, and one of his key questions is, how's 5G going to affect buildings? I go, at last I checked, they ain't got no wheels on them. They already are connected. Okay, maybe at some point 5G will be better, cheaper, but today, who cares? Besides the fact that 5G is hardly anywhere. But he was like really thinking it was going to massively affect the buildings.
Right.
I hate to say it, I'll put up my plexiglass shield for all the eggs that are going to come my way, but Jim McCabe, I forget now, of Memori should talk to Jim Young about not having tritium on the slide. I think Jim McHale knows what tritium is, and it's not on the slide.
So who's it?
But I haven't paid him very much money lately. I think it all depends on, are you shifting some money into Jim McHale's
I think it depends on how many times the word AI appears on your website.
Right.
Yeah, and that's changing a lot. I noticed, John. Everyone's just throwing it up there.
That was kind of my point of pointing that out to begin with. All these comments right there is exactly it.
All right, moving on to Gina. What's the 50 million? What's behind this?
Oh, okay. So it's taken 62 years to get to 50 million drivers, 20 years, 50 million credit card users, and 7 years to get to 50 million internet, and 2 years to get to 50 million Twitter users. So anybody want to take a stab at what that means?
Yeah, people adopt useless stuff quickly.
It's taken about
That's a good point.
And it's taken about 50 years to try and get some standards into the controls industry.
Well, what it's really saying is that technology accelerates adoption of users.
Yeah.
So that's really what it was saying.
Yeah. But there's also a cost factor here, Gina. The cost to get on Twitter is nothing.
Right.
The cost to get on the internet, it does cost you something.
True.
Credit cards, you got to be willing to pay the bill and pay the interest charges. So it's, cost is a big factor here in the speed.
There's
I don't
almost a
disagree.
correlation.
Good pickup, Steve.
At least you didn't do the Jesus one, which I keep hearing.
I haven't
It
heard
took-
that one.
That it took, I don't know what, 2000, however, since 2020, years since Jesus started the Christianity to come up to so many users, counting Christians in the world, I guess. And Mark Zuckerberg met that in however many years. I guess evidently there's more Facebook users at this point in time than.
Well,
There you
Right.
go. Steve, that was free. What Jesus did
free.
was free. Okay, so.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. You go to church lately?
All
I'm
right,
just
let's keep it
quoting,
on
don't,
track
but
here.
don't, I'm just quoting what I keep hearing around here. that-
I know this hat, this
All right,
plate
Rog-
keeps
Roger,
showing up on
Roger,
those
what's this-
pews on Sunday. I missed the free part.
This was just a summary from Cushman and Wakefield. They would just did a Q&A, did a summary of what they think they've learned in Q1. I think most of it is kind of saying people are putting off stuff. So it's just saying that, when do people think they're going to return? People are penciling in September. There are people looking at offices. But a lot of it is kind of just saying not yet, maybe, some, but not others. And on the right, a little bit backing up what Therese was saying there is, yes, there's certainly the occupied offices are low, but I think the interesting thing was the cities there in terms of where people have been either laid off or recruited, and Dallas seems to have the most volatile space, then Tampa and San Antonio and Austin. Seattle kind of next, but you don't see San Francisco or any of the other places there. But I think it's, even those look like they're almost an offset of where people lost their jobs, but really gained them. So there's not, from what Cushman and Wakefield is saying, it's just kind of on hold at the moment, and people are just sitting back and waiting, perhaps until Q4 before they do anything.
I think the September comment's interesting because I'd correlate that with something I'm seeing, which is the first return of in-person trade shows.
And that-
September, October, November, they're starting to be
Yep,
planned.
yep. We signed up for a few.
Mhm.
But
And those
I think also-
Dallas numbers, Roger, is a reflection of the number of companies moving to Texas in this year. In our local paper, they listed like 219 companies are moving from California and everywhere into the Texas, Dallas region.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
I think the last statement was quite interesting, but bold of them, because that was a statement by them. He said, is the US office sector ever going to fully recover? And they're just one answer, yes. So they feel
Okay.
confident that it is going to fully return.
Cool.
Might take time, but they're saying it's going to return.
Okay, so I kind of mentioned this before. 5 nines is a big number. I'd love to get other people's thoughts on this technology. There's a link there. If it's actually got any merits in it, that's my only point there.
Oh, it looks like he's focused on a filter, just
Yeah.
like a regular filter.
Yeah, it's a filter thing. I don't think the picture does it justice. I couldn't find an actual picture of.
What's the name of the company, Anto?
It's on the link.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of interesting. I did read it, Anto. Their tech is actually not only the filter, but they have basically a micro heater on that filler element, and that's the thing that actually kills the virus. So it captures it and kills it at the same time.
Okay, we're past that. Any other comments that didn't go on a slide, get on a slide before we move on? Okay, let us move on. So
Actually, I don't know if you noticed, ASHRAE signed a memorandum of agreement with one of these ultraviolet consortiums. So that was an interesting state as well. Kind of follows along with what you're talking there.
There's a few of those technologies that are going to be hitting the market soon. I wonder if it's too late, if they'll have financial success still.
we shall see. All right, so let us talk about crossing the chasm, which is really all about the technology adoption life cycle, and I think we all know this graphic that has been around for 20 or 30 years from Jeffrey Moore, pictured there, giving a keynote at Connectivity Week, I believe, 10 years ago, actually. And you know, a lot of people I know has been tracking this for a number of years, trying to figure out exactly where we are in smart buildings. We did that about 10 years ago when he was on Connectivity Week. And I don't know if it's a gut feel or something, but I actually think that we're moving along and we're actually in the chasm right now, or diving into the chasm, or trying to get out of the chasm right now. Because of some of the dynamics, and you know, this is kind of the topic of this conversation, to see what's if that's really the case. I think the important thing is to really sort of understand why the chasm exists, and one of the ways of doing that is to actually look at the visionaries and the pragmatists and sort of really understand what they're all about. And this little table kind of does this, kind of give a little sort of comparison as to the personas of these people. The motivation, visionaries like technology, pragmatists just like to get things done. Things like imagination, visionaries have plenty and pragmatists don't have any at all. And you can see down, you know, all the way down to who they listen to. Visionaries like to listen to innovators, and pragmatists don't like to do that. They actually listen to their peers, their sort of peer group in whatever thing that they're doing, right? So one of the big ahas that I got out of this when I first read the book is that this is not just slightly different between the visionaries and the pragmatists. It's actually completely opposite. The behavior is in many ways very sort of 180 degrees. Where the visionaries are happy to try things that are incomplete, but the pragmatists really are only interested in what Jeffrey Moore calls whole product or complete product, which is really a very interesting concept. And the whole product concept is interesting because it's not just about, you know, whether the batteries are in a product kind of a thing. It's really thinking about the whole experience of consuming a product or a service or a technology that has to have all of its components that's necessary for pragmatists to actually adopt it and actually use it seriously. And one of the sort of examples of this is electric vehicles. Electric vehicles, you've been able to buy electric vehicles in some fashion for quite a while now. But one of the things that Tesla did was they actually looked at the whole product concept, and they made sure all of the components of the experience of purchasing and running a car is there, right? Everything from insurance to secondhand market to dealership to service, and a whole bunch of sort of other experience that's not actually to do with the core product. It's all the things around it. That's really what makes the whole product be able to be consumed by the pragmatist sort of users. So the question that I think we should be asking, if it is true that we are in the chasm, we're trying to get out of this chasm here. The question is, what is the whole product for smart buildings? Right, and how and this is from the perspective of owners, obviously, not from our perspective. We almost don't count because we, I think, by nature, more akin to visionaries. But what is the whole product for what it is that we offer? And so that's kind of where I want to leave it. And I'm going to kill the slides, and we'll have a conversation, and maybe even you know, the attendees out there. Sort of chime in on what components make up a whole product. And
I've always had a bit of a different take on the Moore's crossing the chasm and making the whole product. But defining the whole product before you get there, the definition of a whole product is it hides all the complexity, and we were talking about this on the Wednesday call, right? The big challenge with new technologies is complexity. And it doesn't matter where in the spectrum of stuff, right, that you were talking about, even from your first using an electric light bulb, right? When you first put an electric light bulb in the house, there was a lot of complexity involved in getting the wires to your house and the switch and the training and everything else. So when he defines a whole product, he means hiding the complexity. What is all the things needed? Because the early adopters deal with complexity, right? Because we like to tinker and play and investigate and understand and know how all the pieces are working and stuff. And then we don't really, we'll solve the complexity as a result. So that's always been my take on the definition of whole product. So when you ask the question, what's needed to do that? What are the pieces? What are the complexities? What's needed to hide those complexities?
I know that's an interesting take. I've had a different view of that, but I get you. That's an interesting take, and I can't disagree with you. My take on whole product has always been more in the realm of context, but I really get what you're saying there. I'm gonna have to think about that. It's like sort of hiding the complexity, just making it easy to consume and all that. So yeah.
Which includes delivery, right?
Yeah.
And my question for you on where we are you talking about in overall, are buildings smart today versus certain aspects? Like where is building automation specifically on the curve or access control? You're talking about your feeling of what would make a building smart overall. That's what you're at. That's where you're calling out where the industry is, right?
Yeah, yes, and obviously with each specific piece of technology, it could actually be in a different phase.
Quadrant.
Right? But
Yeah,
if you take it in aggregate,
just want to make sure. Yep.
and specifically take it in aggregate with respect to how our ultimate customers, the owners, are looking at it. That's the only thing that really matters. So,
right.
And some of the comments that I heard that a couple of weeks ago at both Haystack and ControlCon, kind of, especially around things like MSI and other things that we've already talked about, sort of indicates that the customers are asking for what we have in a completely different way, right? They just they're asking, how can I get it? They're not asking, I think Anna has great points. They're not asking how to make it all work by, what pieces do I need to buy, right? Which is the complexity bit, but how can I get that benefit of all this stuff that you've got? That's basically what I was hearing.
Interesting. So I'm coming at it from why would I do it? You're coming from how can I get it? And I'm sure it's a little bit of everything.
I think the why is important though, Bill, right? Because you're not going to get to the how and the who and the what unless there's a why, right? Unless someone says, I absolutely want this.
But the chasm is also, I think, caused by, even if you've got really smart people who, REITs and people who want it, they tend to put a contractual chain in between us and them. And the contractual chain is not the guys who are prepared to make the jump. They're quite happy to sit in doing what they were doing. As we talked about before, if someone comes along and gives a free chiller because they want to charge for water, the mechanical contractor is going to go, no, how do I make money on free? So they're kind of blocking some of this themselves, even though the users are beginning to ask the questions. There's still this supply chain issue of the people in between not grasping the nettle to actually support where their customers want to go and where we could take them.
So that's equivalent to all the dealerships across America complaining that Tesla would go direct to customers, right? So it's kind of part of the whole product is also how to eliminate some stuff, including complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they've got a bigger vision, right? Their vision is you can order a Tesla from your iPhone. It will drive itself from the factory to your home as soon as it's ready. But, that's taking everybody out of the chain.
Perfect.
Bill and I talked about this, the tendency for the established market to resist change because it interferes with current and existing business and business model, right? And I think what I just heard you say is basically that, right? There's too much established business happening right now, and changing some of that, making things easier, taking the need for certain roles out of the equation will disrupt that to a point where people are not sure how to deal with it, how to evolve.
It's going to have to change because, you know, all the new services and things are going along are SaaS. How's a contractor going to make money out of SaaS, which is something, you know, he's probably not engaged with.
Oh, and that transition is horrible. I watched a friend of mine that owns a business and primarily selling Autodesk. And Autodesk, you know, a couple of years ago came out and said, no more buying our software. It's a monthly subscription. And watching just reseller after reseller after reseller go out of business because it couldn't deal with that change. That lump sum project payment upfront, as opposed to spreading it out over 4 years or whatever it might be.
Wow.
Think about the cash flow impact of that business change.
But something's got to happen to that supply chain for the change, you know, for the thing to happen, because that's the way the models are beginning to take shape of all the new innovative sort of cloud services.
To me, what needs to happen is the members of the supply chain need to recognize this. You know who I'm talking to on this call, and you need to at least start adopting some of this now and phase it in rather than wait and then you're done.
So that's an interesting point, Bill, because I've always had people come at different values from in our marketplace. The difference between a push and a pull marketing campaign, right? I find a lot of companies, manufacturers tend to do a push, right? Push it onto the channel, push it into the distributors. It's their problem to push it into the marketplace. Some have been innovative and have done the pull model where they've gone out and, you know, shown new technologies, new solutions to the end end user. And that's created a pull on the channel, right? And the channel has to adopt or die in the process.
Right.
Mark Peacock, unfortunately, he's usually on this. He's usually got a really good view on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's tricky. I mean, we even have the customers themselves who could benefit the most from this. And I remember a conversation we had in this group a while ago that Jim was talking about. They don't even know how to procure it. They don't know how to procure a monthly subscription. It's lowest bidder, and here's your project, and you know, send in your quotes.
Yeah, I think that thanks Tracy for that opening. To Bill's point, what I would say is our problem is not the channel or its ability to adopt. It's the customer. The customer has a lot of trouble adopting to new business experiences. They don't have the procurement or the financial budgeting internally to do it, which tends to lead to gridlock rather than action. All the players, all the companies that I know are very responsive, but it's hard to respond when, you know, the large institutional owners of these assets can't respond.
So
is that the chasm?
I think what you just said is a new procurement model is part of what needs to be a complete product.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So I get that, and that could be the chasm, at least part of it. And what's interesting is we play in multiple verticals that have similar channel builds and similar like end users in a sense. So we're also seeing like this chasm, which could also be like a plateau from the early adopters or whatever. We are also seeing like a little vibration and movement along up the usability. And so to Jim's point, I'm not sure it's like us who's going to convince customers or just their overall life experience. Like that's going to be like, okay, we need to, you know, okay, for me, I have a wine subscription. I have a smoothie subscription. I have a video subscription. Almost by definition, it just starts to soak into my DNA. Okay, maybe that is the way to go out here in the commercial world too. Maybe that's the chasm we're trying to cross.
Bill, it's not about us trying to persuade the users to behave a certain way. I think the point is that they are starting to behave in that way,
Yep.
and we have to adopt how we go to market and the pieces of products, how the composition of it and the services, the channel and everything else to fit that model. Right? It's not the other way around. And this is something that I know that you've been saying for the past year, is that we need to get out of our own way and actually construct a whole product that they can consume, including new procurement model and other things that we've talked about. Now, how we do that is a separate question, and it may be hard, but the signals are, I think that what's happening is the signals are that the end clients are starting to ask for fundamentally what we have, but not how we're delivering it.
I think to Bill's point, Bill, you're muted. I know you're trying to talk. This is generational, and I think that Joe consumer, millennials coming into decision-making positions and so forth, grew up with this, and it's much more comfortable in general in the way the world works. So I think that's driving a lot of why we're seeing this.
Okay, and another complexity here, I think, is that the product is not well defined, because the people who are using the product are evolving daily, and they just see this. They're not exactly sure what they want. They want what they saw yesterday, and then yesterday is another day, and now they want something different. So I think it's a bit of a moving target. Everybody is evolving extremely fast.
Strangely, I think
Not fast enough.
I think the end user is kind of, the reason people like that who are getting smarter are kind of getting to the point where they're having to use the MSI to almost help make sure someone in the supply chain gives them what they want. This is a role that's evolved, and they're kind of using them as saying, hey, I do want BIM into my solution here. Can you make sure it happens, and talk to the contractors here to make sure whoever delivers it does integrate it properly, and so there's movement, but it's just slow.
Yeah. And Anto didn't,
Sort of
I mean, there's a
the most
fighting
influential
across.
speaker presentation that I've heard in the last couple of weeks is Robert Real at ControlCon, right? And he drew the picture exactly the way Roger sort of ended up saying, right? He basically said there's this big portfolio owner, and we were trying to figure out how to implement all of this smart stuff, and the answer that they ended up was that we need to employ MSIs. Right, and then they explained it much better than I have, but that's basically what they said. In other words, they're asking for it. MSIs happen to be the mechanism that they put forward.
Yep. Can I get an word edgewise? Is that what you're presenting is kind of also at cross purposes. I mean, I think earlier, even on this call, and it happens on every call, it's that customers don't want one solution. They want people being able to contribute to a solution that's somewhat open. And the examples that you gave of crossing the chasm, I mean, yes, it's what Elon Musk has done with Tesla. And prior to that, it was eventually what Steve Jobs was able to do with the iPhone, which was very well documented in the documentary General Magic, and everybody should see that because this is I think this is exactly what we're going through. And whether we need some sort of messiah figure like Steve Jobs or like Elon Musk to really get people to line up, but in both those cases, they gave up, a solution where they provided every piece. And what we've said earlier on this call and in every call is that we want open APIs and we want to be able to build something together. So how do you make how do you make those two things go together? It seems like headwinds to getting across the chasm. But eventually it'll happen, just like when Steve Jobs held up that phone that day. All the pieces will come in. But, I think there's definitely auditions for the Messiah happening right now, but I haven't seen it yet.
I have two thoughts on that. One is, first of all, going back a little bit in the conversation, I think it is up to us who kind of do this for a living to solve the problems that the pragmatics need. pragmatists.
Pragmatist.
And that needs to be a part of our evolving business strategy. But the other thing that keeps coming back to me when I'm thinking about MSI and what Roger was saying is there is a model in our industry that exists that does this already. It's called a general contractor, right? When a building owner wants to build a building, the first call is the architect and the next call is a general contractor. And the general contractor is responsible for all the this and that and all the subs and plumbing and electrical and so on and so forth. And that's effectively the challenge that we have, is trying to tie together all these different little applications. You know, a lot of us kind of grew up mostly in the core lighting, HVAC kind of applications. Now they're all over the place. So somebody that can handle all of that, bringing that all into a solution that can tie it all together and make it meaningful and work together. I mean, that's effectively the role of an MSI or a general contractor, right?
I agree, Tracy. My only problem is that none of those guys are my customer. The architect, the general contractor are 10 years gone before I even arrive on the scene. They have nothing to do with what I do, which is the operating side of the buildings. And the only other problem is not only are they gone, the money that they had to spend was gone too, 10 years ago.
Yeah, we're kind of at the end of that spend cycle, aren't we? The only place I'd rather not to be is the landscaper, maybe.
Right. So
way at the end of the supply chain, but
the key is that for me in this whole conversation, the thing I struggle with is who the customer is, right? And this industry has struggled with that for a long time. On the new construction side of the business, or even major renovation, it's pretty obvious who the customer is. But once we get into that operating mode, look, my customers are very, very large institutional users, pharma and life science customers. My biggest problem is that they've outsourced almost all their employees to third-party operators. So the line between where that third-party operator starts and the owner stops is basically also in flux across the portfolio. Half the time, the third-party contractors are my competitors. So it's very, very difficult. I think that in order to cross the chasm, we need to define who the customer is, and we need to be honest with ourselves that a number of us that are on the controls and original side, the typical side of the equation, that's one customer, and that operations going forward, that's another customer. It's a different business, it's a different chasm, it's a different customer.
Jim, when the building's finished and there's people occupied, is the facility management company really the general contractor and you've got the same issues?
Potentially. I mean, I think that there is a turnover phase there as well. If we were to really set a timeline, Roger, there's the construction phase, a turnover, and then operations.
Yeah.
But if we look at where a lot of the operating technologies, the FDD, these other things apply, it's when the building's been built 5, 10, 20, 30 years later. And there is no sign of the construction budget or any of those people by the time I get there. So focusing on them for me it's just not my customer. I don't know what to do with it.
So
people finding money now to do space management and touchless lifts and other stuff, that's because they've been forced to. Suddenly there is money available.
Well, I mean, I think, to be fair, the dynamism that everyone's referred to on the call is really there. Things are changing very quickly now. And I think that there is more of an appetite for these operating things than there used to be.
I think the people are becoming are the product. They're the people that are receiving the product. They're the people that are going to reoccupy these buildings that have been unoccupied. And so I think everybody is looking, how do I satisfy them? They're all looking for a mobile experience, and they want all of our services as little ads that they can add to their phone. If we take a look at everybody's cell phone on this call, I mean, they'd be so completely different what little bits and pieces we have added and what services we have on our phone that the other person doesn't have. And in fact, when you go for coffee and stuff, that's often what you're exchanging is what does that do and why do you have it on there? So that is, I think, is the product, is the people in the buildings, and that's what they're expecting. They're expecting this total mobile experience because that's what everything else in their life is. And we basically resist that. We greet them that with hard networks.
Well, I mean, let me just make a counter argument to that for a second, Ken. So let's just say that we go back to temperature control, and I hate to do that because we do so much more, but just to make an obvious point, we could give somebody that app on their phone, but the mechanical systems that are in the 5 million buildings that are in place don't support them. There isn't sensing technology and there isn't distribution technology in any of those buildings, notwithstanding all the beautiful color graphics you see of people controlling the temperature in their cube. The trillions of dollars of capital investment to get there have not been made.
Mhm.
So I can give somebody the eye candy on their phone, but is it really going to have a material effect on the comfort in their cube? The answer is no, because the capital equipment doesn't exist.
Yeah, let's have another. I'm going to offer another counterpoint perspective. Why do I need to touch my phone to be comfortable and safe in my office? That should be automatic. I don't want to pick up my phone, right? When I need food and I don't know what I want, I'll go on to DoorDash and order my lunch, but I'm expecting the environment to be right. I shouldn't have to get involved, right? The fact that we're telling people they have to get involved with a mobile device means something's wrong, right?
How do they know you're there?
I'm going to
Mobile device.
Automatically sense that I'm there. I filled
On
out a
your mobile
profile.
device.
I filled out a profile when I took the job, rented the space. I should never have to pick this thing up again. Why?
I'm going to counterpoint you then, John. So I'll do the smart home example, right? You know my place. I got smart every bloody thing in the house.
Yeah.
And before I had the old Honeywell T, whatever they were, 7200 stupid stats, two of them upstairs, downstairs, like the VCR, they were always set on some configuration. When I changed them out to Nest, now my wife and I both have the same app, and now we do app wars because I can't be bothered getting off my couch to go up to the thermostat to change it, right? I do pick up my phone and change it. I do pick up the phone to answer the door. There's a lot of stuff because I can. The question I'm asking is probably, we're not offering that sort of, if similar stuff was available, I know that probably it's a given, but would I probably mess with it? Probably, much like I do at home,
Really? Let me
Oh,
ask
you
you a
just want to
question.
walk into your office and everything's okay. I mean, your home
No,
is
it's
different. You're the
not, but
owner,
that's-
operator, and responsible for the deficient HVAC system of your house. I'm an
But that's
occupant.
the-
I'm paying to lease this space. Why do I have to get involved to make it safe and comfortable? Tell
Because
me.
it's not
let me
right.
ask-
Because
let
we've
me
all
ask
been
a
doing this
question.
for years and years, and it's not right. It's all rubbish, right? It's crap.
Right. So
Which-
things aren't changing other than the fact that there's eye candy, or as Jim said, there's the appearance that I should be able to make my room comfortable, but no matter what temperature I put in it, it's still uncomfortable.
Which
What
do
is
you
it?
think is the more popular feature of Nest? Its ability to learn and understand your settings and where you are, or the ability to go onto your phone and have an interface that you can do?
I don't know.
That's
I would actually say that the phone, what Anna has just said is basically the phone is part of the complete product of a smart home,
Sure.
right? I mean, it's attached to that. Whether it is of the commercial building, I don't know. I'm not as convinced as Ken. I think it's a side
But
issue.
that's my point. That's one of those leap of faith problems, right? I struggle with the fact that we collectively here have been around for 1,000 years, have been doing it one way. Are we getting in our own way?
Mm-hmm.
But what the phone does for the home is really brings everything together, right? So that the home becomes manageable if you want to manage it, and you can see stuff, etc.
Okay, so that's a good point. But let me just extend that, right? And I think back to the whole point about that whole experience, right? Because if I am in my office and I do want to pick up the phone and I want to order from the cafeteria downstairs for lunch and I want to make sure the lift's turning up, let's not put it in isolation of just HVAC, right? From an occupant's perspective, there are 100 things I want to do in that building with my phone. What we do has to be one part of that. It's not the be all and end all to the thing. Yes, if you focus on it for yeah, that's not compelling. If it's integrated to the rest of the experience, yes, much more compelling, right?
I think, Gino, you're trying to say something?
I was just going to say, for me, it comes down to convenience. You know, what is convenient? So I have to think about, how many times how long do I look for the remote before I give up and go change the channel on the TV? Right? I mean, I will search for that thing for 30 minutes before I ever just walk up and just change the channel. So to me, it's a lot about, adoption, and it's about, I don't know, convenience of things. I mean, I have some smart things in my house, but when I had to start downloading different applications on my phone to change the lights or the smart plugs or the CCTV I have out, I just gave up. I'm not downloading 5 different applications. I'm sorry, I'm not.
But
I mean,
you have a remote for your TV. I talk to my TV. I tell it.
I was surprised you watched the channels.
I was surprised that there are buttons on your TV.
but
What's
it's
a
those
channel?
little buttons you can't find on the side that you never have to look for until you get really desperate. But I always lose the remote. But for me, it's like, I mean, here we are in technology, and I've been doing smart building design since 2008. And you would think, good Lord, I'd probably live in a very, very intelligent house, but I don't. And the reason why is because the technology hasn't made it convenient for me to do so. Sure, it does a lot.
Yeah. You're a pragmatist.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, I guess, but it's not really that. If you made it easy for me, I'd do it all day long.
Aha, reduce the complexity.
There you go. So
Okay,
I mean,
you made your point, Anna.
I have all the stuff. I have all the stuff in my house to be smart, intelligent, and everything else. I don't use it because I have to download 5 different apps and sign into 5. And at that point, I'm like, I'm too busy. I don't have time.
That is exactly the position that we're in with a lot of the technologies that we have.
There you go.
My point.
Nothing is integrated, working with one another.
Exactly.
I think part of what our
all
industry
about-
can do is that openness and ability to integrate much more easily with all these other applications.
But don't forget, we got 200 people in a building, not one. And it's okay if you got an office, but you got an open space. Does it become voting rights, and we become a democratic decision on what the temperature or humidity or whatever else should be?
That's your C-suite level. If you're C-suite, you override everybody.
Yeah, you make those voting algorithms, that's for sure. But part of the problem in this, I'll bring it back to business. I think I did this last week too. The leaders in our industry have absolutely no reason to make it easy to integrate to other people's solutions.
Okay.
And that's going to hold us back for a long time.
So I want to circle back to Teresa's point then about the what do you call him, the Messiah. One of the things about the Messiah model, right, with both Steve and Elon, is that sure, I mean, he was the Messiah and they led the way, but everybody else followed behind, right? Android came as a result of Apple, right? And Android is the open platform, and Elon Musk's mission is to make all cars electric, not just his. So, the Messiah kind of leads the direction, and then others will follow with different solutions and maybe different text, but just as compelling.
But it's not a blind following, as in the real Messiah. It's really a following because that's the best way of moving forward. If I was a battery manufacturer, for example, either to cars or to iPhones, that's how I get my product to market, to make the best battery so that it can get into the iPhones or the Androids or the Samsungs or the Teslas, right? So you get sort of integrated, and you get integrated essentially into that complete product, as seen by the ultimate customer.
As we talk about the complexities of our industry, we're engulfed in the complexities of Apple wars, Microsoft wars, Google wars. And as you cross over those platforms, just some of the unbelievable things that happen. And Zoom, which seems to somehow fall over all of it and sort of work, is a product that we like because it does that. It basically is somehow is dealt with a lot of those platforms. And if you actually get inside of any one of those platforms, trying to get out is just unbelievable what kind of anger they put us through. So I think that kind of preconditions us. And also when you're trying to define a product, are you defining a product for an Apple user, or are you defining it for an Android user, or you know, like basically trying for me to try and get Microsoft Team working. I'm a Google guy, and when it sends me the code, Gmail puts it in my spam bin, and you know, it's just frustration. Plus, I have to stay signed on to Microsoft. I don't use Microsoft, so that's a very annoying thing for me to use MS Team. So these are two platforms that I have to use both of them, and it's just extremely frustrating. So I think there's problems bigger than our problem of trying to define what is the product.
So can I kind of add a little bit of a difference in that? And I've been kind of reading the comments here, and everybody's been making comments about BAS. And I think someone on the call said something about, you know, the manufacturers. And one of the things I often found interesting, and this is because, of course, I've worked with some of these manufacturers, to someone's point that they have no reason to make it easy for anybody. Why would they? But a lot of times you hear around manufacturers that they want to be the basis of design. And I always think if you want that manufacturer to be the basis of your design, that's probably the very first problem you're going to have. The first wrong thing you've done is made a specific manufacturer, sorry, anybody on this call with manufacturers, the basis of a design. Because then you've got to build everything around that. And I think the basis of that design should be exactly what your expectation is of running a building, of operating a building, and how you want to manage that building. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard that I'm sure you have, basis of design. I always cringe whenever I hear it. When a big manufacturer says, oh yes, such and such is the basis of that design. I'm like, oh God, this isn't going to turn out well for anyone.
Right. Isn't that like a euphemism for they pulled the drawer out and they picked out the spec?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
Gina,
It happens all over the place.
think about what we started about earlier with Ken saying trust is having multiple options, not just being reliant on one. So it
there you go.
brings that home. Sorry, Tracy.
You're going to say, Tracy?
No, that's okay. You know, as cross-browser compatibility testing, that's the phrase that came to mind when Ken was talking, by the way. But it's the same thing I asked a customer today. It's a school system. Do you guys use Macs or do you use PCs? Because how we perceive is going to change based on that fact. They chose a technology or a provider to base their systems around, and we have to adapt to that. And it just goes to show you, it kind of takes you down that locked-in proprietary path.
Actually, just to that, Tracy, automated buildings is read on over 1,000 different combinations of devices and browsers. Can you believe that? A small magazine like this that isn't very well read. So you can imagine what the situation is for, you know, like a well-read magazine. And then we have, you know, all these, that doesn't include, I don't support any of the WordPress or any of these, you know, online magazine type formats as well. So just a simple thing of getting your message out is you're into thousands of combinations. So I think that complexity, we're talking about simplifying the complexity, but that's another problem.
Yeah.
Hey, Anto, can I say something just as a little bit of a wrap up from my perspective? I lived in Asia for 11 years, and as the second oldest guy on the call, I'm gonna give a little wisdom, and it's literally worth the price of admission. We've been talking about how we've got to sort of lead from over here in our direction. And there's an old saying in some of the Eastern wisdom traditions that if you want to go east, stop going west.
Okay.
Yeah, but you obviously need a compass to know which way you're pointing. to do that.
No, just turn
Otherwise,
around.
Otherwise, you're just walking
Just turn around, I know.
Just turn
Thank you,
around.
Well, if you
man.
go east for long enough, it will be coming from the west anyway.
Okay, we're waiting for full circle. I get it.
Yeah.
That can't be right, Tracy. The world is flat.
Okay. Any last comment from anyone?
I'm just going to say there is hope for the about a world without the manufacturers involved, because in the UK now, the manufacturers only got about 25% of the market. It's now owned by system integrators, and I just released a report with Memory that shows there's 385 system integrators in just the UK market. So they've been squeezed out because of the non-openness. And you go in and they're the first people kicked off when people are bidding jobs now. They're the people that are, sorry guys, you're not open, go away. And so they're now coming products, so providers like the industrial world rather than doing turnkey projects.
Okay, so on that, I think that we should wrap this up. It's been a great conversation as always. We will continue on the new market dynamics next week for one more week. So with that, thank you everyone for being here. Video will be up in the morning and we'll see you next week. Thanks all.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.